Good evening. Good evening and welcome to Facebook Live with myself, Ruth from Top Schools, and I'll be introducing my very special guests in just a moment. So this is our normal Thursday Facebook Live. We're also on YouTube, we're on LinkedIn, and anywhere that you might be watching. Welcome if you're joining live, and welcome if you're watching this on catch up. So tonight I'm very pleased to have two guests. So welcome Justin and Howard. Hi guys, if you take yourselves off mute.
Hi Ruth, thanks for having us.
Hi Ruth,
Hi Howard. Thanks for making the time. So we're very international today. I'm in Hong Kong. Justin, you are in?
I'm in Bangkok at the moment.
And Howard, you're in the States, are you?
Yes, I'm in Florida this morning.
So for you, it's small. So by the power of modern technology, here we are, all in the one stream. So thank you very much. We're here to talk about trends in education. So maybe first of all, I should just ask you to introduce yourselves very briefly, if you don't mind, Justin.
Sure. So yeah, I'm Justin Hardman, based in Hong Kong. My whole career has been in education. First part was working in schools in the education technology space. But for the past 10 plus years, I've been consulting with schools around ed tech and also organizing professional learning training for educators. So my organization, 21C Learning, does conferences and events around all different topics in education for educators, mostly in international schools in the Asia Pacific region.
And we should say that we have a very special event coming up in February. So we'll maybe share more about that as we go along, which is the GBA School Awards. Yeah. So Howard.
Yeah, well, I was a teacher and a principal in Canada and then came over to Macau, almost 20 years ago to start Alberta's first ever international school. And we grew this tiny little school called the International School of Macau up to about 1,500 students and started to expand into other countries. So we added schools in Phnom Penh and Guangzhou. And then I moved on and started to expand more international schools and currently oversee 7 international schools, 3 in China, Macau, Phnom Penh, Chiang Mai, Thailand, and Phuket. So got lots of schools going on and doing different services to help schools out, and really excited to be partnering with Justin as well with 21C. And I'm very lucky that I get to see so many different schools and work so closely with them.
I don't know if you remember, Howard, but I started Top Schools in 2012 and you were one of the first. Do you remember that we connected and you very kindly invited me to the International School of Macau, which I don't believe I ever took you up on. But thank you for your support from very early days. And Hong Kong, Asia, it's a very small place, and the education space is what, 2 degrees of separation, I would say.
If that, right? Yes.
Yeah.
So, and Justin, we've known each other for years. So let's talk. We've got some talking points prepared, but I'm going to, as I'm wont to do, I'm going to go off piste. You've obviously been doing this for a long time. What do you see as the absolute key trends, or what's different from in 2024 to when you started in international education in Asia? What would you say?
I would say
it's an interesting question. Go ahead, Howard.
No, you go ahead.
Sure. Sorry, I think there's a bit of a time lag as the internet goes up into space and back down again. I think it's interesting. I think in some ways in education, people sometimes will say, trends are cyclical. If you wait long enough, the thing will come back again. But for sure, there's been a definite trend, I think, post-COVID, right? Towards much more focus on wellness in education. That's really, I'm just here at the moment in Bangkok for an international conference of 1,000 plus principals from around the region. And, that's probably 30% of what people are talking about, right? Both in terms of like student wellness and focus on that, but also just whole school wellness. And of course, you might say, well, shouldn't schools always have been focused on wellness? Isn't that always a priority? But it's much more thinking about it in terms of how do we do this, both in terms of the education, but also all of the systems that we have in place, and how do we ensure that students are, of course, learning, but learning to be healthy, balanced people going into the next stage in their educational career.
Howard?
Yeah, and from a parent perspective, I would say parents are much more sophisticated and informed than ever before. They are really coming into schools well informed. They know about IB, they know about A levels, they know about AP, and they're pretty discerning. Schools have to deliver on the promises that they make to parents, and parents have much higher expectations, I think, than ever before. With the increased competition within most of the markets, parents have a very wide choice of what school they're going to send their kids to. They also have very high expectations on their children and what schools they're going to go to for university. So I think schools, gone are the days where we could just do whatever we wanted and parents just trusted us blindly and paid our high tuition fees. They come in and they're very well informed. So we have to make sure that we're very mission centric and that we align and deliver on those promises that we make to parents.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, obviously COVID, I talk with parents every day about the struggles that their own children went through, and we're feeling, the consequences of that now. I mean, it's interesting. I do see an awful lot of discussion about wellness. But Justin, do you think that the parents are completely on board with that? Do you think that's what they're looking for in a school? Or if they are looking for that, do you think that's still very much secondary or even lower down the list of wishes?
I think that there is a disconnect often when it comes to what education is talking about within education and what parents are interested in. I mean, I'm curious what Howard thinks about this as well. And this is much more keen on my mind as well, as I have young kids, right? So when I was obviously started my career, didn't have kids, and working within education now, having been a customer of these schools, it's certainly on my mind. And I think the wellness piece is probably something that is definitely talked about a lot within education. I don't know if parents are choosing schools based on, this school has got a better wellness program than another school. I think parents probably have the expectation that, all schools are going to be, nurturing places for their children as a kind of baseline. So, to some extent, I think this conversation within education is a little bit of a, internal industry conversation that doesn't necessarily reach parents. And sometimes schools, I think, get, into conversations that they think are important that maybe isn't resonating with parents. But I don't know. What do you think about that, Howard?
Yeah, I think you're right. Sometimes we're guilty of talking in our own echo chambers. Obviously, student wellness is so important. We want kids to be happy and healthy. But I think you're right. Parents aren't talking that specifically, but what they are talking about is, what's my student's experience? What's my child's experience at school? Do they feel loved? Do they feel cared for? Do they feel challenged? What's the other students' interactions with their child? So obviously all of that ties into wellness, but maybe they don't use the same language for it. But I think schools get judged around the dinner table every night. How do the students talk? How do the children talk about the school and their school day and what they're experiencing? And I think parents are very tuned into that. They want to make sure that their kids are happy and that they're being properly challenged.
I mean, I think it's one of the talking points that we've got. I mean, we talk about parents as if they're a homogenous group, but they're not, right? So one of the things is that, are you seeing, because we're certainly seeing parents with different backgrounds or different cultural experiences, that they actually have sort of different expectations and they want different things from the schools. Is that something that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think they have different cultural backgrounds. They have different expectations. Obviously, with the increase of mainland families, we're seeing an increase in mainland families for a number of reasons. One of the biggest ones being the double reduction policy inside the mainland. And so bilingual schools that were running international programs can no longer. We're seeing a lot of those schools closed. Those families are now looking for options for their children, and they're coming to Macau or Hong Kong, or they're even traveling to Thailand and Singapore. Um, yeah, I've taught in Hong Kong, Macau, and China, and definitely family groups are different, and even the nature of expats that are coming into our schools now are different.
Mm. Which schools did you say had closed? Sorry, the bilingual schools.
Yeah, some of the bilingual schools, and then Nord Anglia has closed a number of schools inside the mainland recently.
Why is that?
Well, there was always that loophole where bilingual schools were trying to run international programs for
Right.
mainland students, and they were perhaps ignoring the Chinese national curriculum more than they should. This has always been the law that they had to teach the Chinese national curriculum, but I think they stretched it. It wasn't enforced as much, and now it is being enforced. And some schools are finding that they can't offer the international experience that they really wanted to. And they don't have an international school license, they have a bilingual license. And so some of those schools are closing because of that.
I mean, Justin, maybe we can talk to Hong Kong. I think most of the people that watch this, and I'm operating mainly in Hong Kong. Maybe if you're watching, let us know where you're watching from. But to take this question to the Hong Kong market for a moment, then, Justin, what do you think? Obviously, we're seeing huge numbers of mainland families seeking to enter our international schools, and many of them are being successful. What do you think is the impact of that?
I mean, I think it's a multifaceted impact. I think, on the one hand, I think it's the English levels are not always at the same as they might have been in the past with the students from other backgrounds, and so I think some schools are needing to put in, more programs around supporting second language learners. I think that there's much more of a push towards having bilingual programs that can where you can still learn English as a priority, but also maintain mother tongue. I think that's a priority. I think it's coming into whole new schools. Yuchong is opening that new program, which is actually running mainland curriculum in Hong Kong. Yeah. And that's not something I think even 5 years ago we would have said that would be something that would be happening. And so is that a one-off, or is that portending some sort of trend? I'm not sure.
Well, it's a one-off. Definitely... Sorry, there is a delay. I mean, that one is a one-off in the sense that was actually a government tender, and they're getting the land. Is it the land or the building? I think it's the land, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're not sure, but.
I'm not sure.
Right, but it's not a one-off in the market. I mean, we had the International Schools Festival just last month, and there are a few schools that are purely looking for mainland students, and we've never heard of them. I mean, we would not call them international schools at all. But in privately, there's a few of them. There's at least 4 or 5 of them now, and so I think that's a growing trend. But the Yuzhong one was a one-off, I think, in terms of what the government will support.
Well, I mean, I think this whole concept of what is an international school is actually very dynamic, and that's a conversation that's beyond Hong Kong, but it's certainly happening everywhere, right? Where what is, used to be international schools were schools for, foreign passport holders that wanted to replicate in some way the experience their child would have had back home, wherever that might be. And it's certainly evolved into much more of a sense of, well, international schools are essentially just private schools that are running some sort of international program. But it doesn't mean that they're international in terms of the student population or international in terms of teaching staff necessarily. So it's definitely changed in the last few years, and I suspect it will continue to evolve as we move forward.
Yeah, this is very interesting to me, because these are the conversations I have with parents, almost every day. One of the comments or questions, well, which ones of the schools are more diverse, because whether the family is fully Chinese, is mixed Chinese, is not Chinese, regardless, they are all looking for diversity, and it's just becoming just increasingly just elusive, more and more elusive. Interesting.
Well, I mean, some of the trends are interesting too, in that I was talking to someone who's running, a bilingual school in China, and they were saying, the parents don't want the Chinese in the school. They want the school to be only teaching English, right? Because in their mind, what they're paying for is their child to gain proficiency in English. So they don't want to have the Chinese side of it. And then in Hong Kong, the bilingual trend is in some ways driven by expat parents that are not Chinese, because they want their kids to pick up Chinese language. So it's not always going in the way that you might expect,
It's not.
In fact, in Hong Kong, go ahead.
Sorry, go. I don't think that the increase of the bilingual programs in Hong Kong schools is driven by non-Chinese families. I think that's firmly driven by the mainland families. But you're right that the effects, it reminds me of years and years ago, about 20, 30 years ago, there was a public school, local school on Llama Island where I lived. And they decided, they must have been one of the very first to offer this sort of international stream in their local school, because there are lots and lots of non-Chinese families on Llama at that time. So they set up this international stream alongside their normal local stream, and they didn't expect what happened. A lot of the Chinese families that spoke Cantonese at home wanted to go to the international stream, and the international families who spoke something else, probably English at home, wanted to go for the local stream. So that was interesting for them, and that was a long, long time ago. But yeah, do you think that, what about changing the whole, how does that affect the whole culture of the school? When we have the diversity? Well, everything, homework, for example, when you've got the academic expectations are changing, but because the parents have slightly different expectations, and they put pressure on the school may not necessarily, well, they may cater to the parents, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. Do you think?
Yeah, I haven't, in my conversations with people in schools, detected any sense that, based on current trends in terms of student population, trends and policies in regards to things like homework. I think to some extent there are different, you would know better than me, Ruth, but there's different kinds of schools in Hong Kong that cater to different sorts of parents in terms of what their expectations might be in regards to, homework and those sorts of things. So there's some sort of sorting that already exists. So I'm not sure that there is necessarily pressure in any particular school around changing of these policies in regards to demographic shifts.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to being mission centric. And, Justin, you alluded to this. There's different types of schools that have different cultures and different expectations academically and socially, culturally. And that's very true. And it's as true for parents who are then choosing the school, right? Schools are not McDonald's. They aren't going to allow you to pick and choose what you want. But I think there are different schools for different expectations. As schools, we need to make sure that we're mission centric, that we are finding parents that align with what we want to accomplish and how we want to accomplish it. Homework is a perfect example. I think also at the same time, though, schools in this competitive atmosphere, we would be foolish if we didn't listen to our parents. I don't think we can just close our ears and shut our eyes and try not to listen to parents, and we're just going to do the way we've always done it. That's not going to work. We have to make sure that we are responding. And I think more and more schools too also see the value of personalized learning. I think we are trying to cater more to individual family expectations and needs. If it's homework, I'd rather have kids working on my homework after school than going down the street to a learning center and just doing extra that maybe doesn't match what we're doing at school.
Yeah, picked homework. That's the ever. It's interesting competition. We see, again, just Hong Kong market is what I'm much, much more familiar with. There are certain schools that literally can be very mission centric and pick and choose those families that absolutely meet their align with their values system, and we see very, very thorough selection processes. But that's not most schools, I suppose, especially if we're looking at, regionally. I would say that most schools are actually looking to enroll more students. So how do they then really, really stick to, from an internal point of view, how does that work?
Well, Sure, the temptation is to try to be all things to all people so that you can open your doors and get more people in. The first thing that ends up causing is a lower English level barrier or acceptance level for students. Whereas normally we might have not accepted that student at that English level. Now maybe we will consider them because we need the numbers. Now, if you just stop there, you're really doing a disservice to that family and to your other families. It's fine to accept students with a lower English level if you are creating a program where they can be successful in it. If you're just going to, if you know that a student with this English level will not be successful in your normal program, but you're just going to take them and push them into it and cross your fingers, then that's not appropriate for parents either, or successful for the students. So we have to make sure that we are creating programs alongside that will match that. We're seeing schools doing enhanced Mandarin classes as well to try to add more Mandarin programs into it. And that's partly to respond to mainland families, but it's also to respond to a growing expat realization about the importance of Mandarin. So I think we have to be responsive as schools.
On the subject of language, and we've got Michael Scott who's watching, who says, trilingual. So you never know. Interesting. It's so interesting because we meet families and they are so interesting and very typically have at least 2 or 3 or 4 languages going on at home. So thanks for your comment, Michael. I see a comment from a few questions that I'll maybe get to at the end, but please do, if you have any questions for our guests, particularly Justin and Howard. We're talking about trends in international schools. So if you have any questions or comments, post them and we will answer them. We are running out of time fast. I want to get on to the idea of hot topic is technology in schools. So I know, Justin, you come from a tech background and you touched on this at the beginning. It is a question that parents ask us a lot. They might be concerned about that. But again, from a school's point of view, what is the trend that you see there, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent, the technology piece kind of settled down and was in the most international schools pretty much everyone was doing more or less the same thing when 2 or 3 years ago. Students get laptops in secondary, maybe they get some sort of iPad or device in middle school, and every school manages it in a slightly different way, but that's more or less like the standard, right, in most schools. And I think what's upended things in recent times is obviously the whole piece around AI in education, and how that's going to plug in, and how schools will respond to that. I mean, and it's really ranging. I mean, there's schools, I would say, that have their head in the sand and just maybe this will go away. So there's schools that are embracing it wholeheartedly and all different aspects of both teaching, but also with students using it. My personal take on it is, I think with AI, schools need to not necessarily embrace it wholeheartedly, but need to be engaging with it and need to be figuring out how they can leverage it in safe, ethical, and responsible ways. And that no other way than to just do it, because nobody has a playbook for this, right? Because it is evolving constantly. The other big piece I think that's happening right now, and lots of conversations in many schools about, is around the whole piece around cell phones in schools, mostly prompted by the Jonathan Haidt book. So we're seeing some schools moving towards, doing the ban in secondary or lower as well, obviously, or towards using something like these Yonder pouches where they have to put it in a box or something when they come to school every day, to say, no, students should be able to use the phones. And that's one where parent and cultural expectations are a big piece as well. I haven't heard about any of these conversations taking place in mainland China, for instance, where, the phone is much more in some ways embedded into the way people work and everything like that. So again, that's one of those cultural pieces. And yeah, I think if you were to ask anyone at schools right now, what's the hot topic around technology, it would definitely be the cell phones for kids.
Yes, yeah, I've been hearing that a lot. What do you think, in a couple of years' time then, what do you think? The kids will leave it at home or leave it in their bag at the door? Or I'm hopeful that might be the case.
I mean, everyone has different takes on it. I think that I'm keen to hear what Howard says on this after, but I think that there's a lot of schools moving towards, it goes in a locker when you get to school. You can't say leave it at home because there's too much need for it, right, in terms of case of emergency or all of that kind of stuff. So I don't think leave at home will be anyone, but definitely there'll be many schools that are already doing, it needs to go in the pouch or it needs to go in the locker at the start of the day. And then I think other schools will definitely have, discrete policies around it. Maybe it's up to the teacher. You have to put it in, a basket at the front of the entrance to the classroom, that type of thing. Certainly, it would be, if I was a parent, I would have questions to schools. Do you have a policy, and what is your approach to this? Because if they don't have a policy and they can't answer that question, I would have serious questions about what they're doing, right, as a school. Certainly something that every school should be contending with as part of the whole digital citizenship curriculum. And the same goes with AI as well. It's another good question for parents to ask schools. What is your school, approach to AI? Do you have policies in place? And how are you using it or not using it?
Yeah, I mean, I think even before we talk about AI, it is like phones, devices. We get questions from parents. When a certain school I went to said that they give iPads to 8-year-olds. We think that's a bit early, or when do they give iPads out, or when do they insist on one-to-one laptop schemes, and when do they ask a child to create a YouTube account? Because that happens even before. So I think, from my point of view, I feel that a lot of teachers and some schools are still struggling with all of that before we even introduce AI into the equation. It's just a minefield, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think the main thing is that schools have. Go ahead, Howard. Yeah.
I mean, I just think it's all of these things are tools, but they are becoming more and more ubiquitous. I mean, I'm an old dinosaur, right? So I remember when the first phone came out with the camera attached to it, and as administrators, we thought, oh my God, this is going to be the end of decency, that kids were going to be taking cameras into bathrooms and taking photos all the time. And then Snapchat came out, right? We all hated Snapchat because kids could take these disappearing messages, and they were always taking photos of each other, and these separate groups that other kids were excluded from, and then they were making fun of. Has that evolved a bit? Right, we've got policies now. I don't think we worry as much about cameras. Kids and adults have gotten better understanding of what's appropriate use of a phone as far as cameras go, and what should be posted, not be posted. I think we have to teach that to kids. I think there will be time where we learn how to handle our devices better, but they're definitely going to become more and more part of our everyday. Over here in the States, we're seeing schools banning phones as well. So it really is a worldwide phenomenon.
I think almost all of the disciplinary issues that I come across, if children are suspended or even expelled, they're down to misuse, inappropriate use of a device. We have a question for you, Justin. I haven't read it. It's relatively long. Maybe Jacqueline.
Yeah, I was just reading the question. Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Jacqueline. Thanks. And actually, it's one close to my heart because my background actually is as a technologist and a coder, and so I'm a strong believer that students should learn how to code in schools, at least in some capacity. I remember having conversations about this 20 years ago, and people would push back and say, oh, our kids aren't going to need to code. They're going to have management jobs, and the coding will be done by other people. And I think that's total nonsense. It's like people saying that you don't need to use AI because it'll just become just sort of embedded in everything we do. I mean, it seems to me obvious that you're going to be a much more, attractive, person in the workforce if you have these skills. You're going to be a better critical thinker, a better creative thinker if you learn how to code. I think it's true that schools don't really do a good job with this, generally speaking, and largely I think that's because there's not a lot of people working in schools that have these skills themselves, right? And if you don't have the staff that can teach something, then in a way it doesn't happen, because schools are very, people-centric, which is a good thing. But it means that if there's not a staff member that has the skills, then it's, how's it going to happen, right? And that's a hard one to fix because, frankly, if you know how to code, you can be part of the workforce and be coding and outside of education. There are a lot of companies out there that will partner with schools to help them, deliver code. I mean, that's part of what code.org was all about. And so schools should be, looking for these kind of partnerships. And, if I had my way, every school would make coding a core class. But it's not happening necessarily as much as it should be.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Jacqueline. I hope that was a good answer for you. I heard a school, I was talking to a school, I think it was a UK school, that's accepting a coding qualification as a modern foreign language. So exemption from learning French or Spanish or German and substitute code. I thought that was very interesting. Let's talk about, I've got a few questions that probably I might answer them next week. Eva, not quite related to this discussion, but let's see, I might get you at the end as well. We are running out of time. If you have any more questions for our speakers, Justin and Howard, we're talking about trends in international education, not only in Hong Kong, but in the region. Then this is probably your last chance to put the question in the comments box right now. But let's talk a little bit about the region. So this Greater Bay Area came into fashion like five-ish years ago, maybe slightly longer than that. And you're obviously working in the region a little bit more than I am. I do mostly Hong Kong, a little bit of Singapore, a little bit of Malaysia. How do you see the schools connecting throughout the region, and how is that hopefully benefiting them? Howard, I'll take you. Oh, I think we went for it at the same time.
Okay. How are they connecting? Well, if schools are outward facing, they're definitely taking advantage of the greater openness. And we're seeing students have wonderful experiences going into the mainland, whether it's for experience week trips or sports activities. And it used to be just sports travel. You go and compete against another school. That's expanding. Now it's musical competitions or honor bands. You were seeing art competitions and workshops, and a lot of STEAM. So a lot of robotics competitions and builds and stuff like that. So those are fantastic opportunities. As a parent with children, you want to see your kids going into different countries, meeting other kids and having that really enriched experience. I think it's one of the most unique things that we have as international schools, and as a region of so many small little countries or territories, they get these experiences. And I would say, I look at ACAMIS, the Association of Chinese and Mongolia International Schools, that's Hong Kong, Macau, and the mainland. The emphasis isn't on competition per se, it's on ambassadorship. And so they reach out to their, the kids are actually ambassadors, they make friends, they have friends in other schools and other territories, administrative areas, and that's unique. The schools that aren't taking advantage of that, those are the single independent schools that maybe are a little more inward looking, more insular. That's a challenge. Professional development opportunities are huge all over the GBA. They can get involved in so many different things now. And it's 45 minutes to an hour to any one of our cities. So it's a small commute, but you're going, so that creates lots of unique opportunities.
Yeah. Justin, anything to add? Or we should...
this is a good segue to talk about the GBA awards, actually. So I think I agree with Howard. I think there's a lot more of that collaboration between schools in terms of students interfacing, and I think that will continue to increase, especially in the GBA area, because we have that greater connectivity now. Certainly, I'm seeing it more on the professional learning side. There's a lot more back and forth. I was just up in Guangzhou last week at the new Benedin school started by Chow Tai Fook. And they were bringing a lot of people from the local school community in Hong Kong, with the bilingual community in China. Certainly with our events that we do in Hong Kong is bringing a lot of people through in the GBA. And I think there's a lot that Hong Kong schools can teach schools in the mainland. And there's a lot actually of that Hong Kong schools, both government schools and international schools, can learn from some of the new schools in the mainland as well. So I think it's great to have connectivity. And that's a big reason why we started this new program called the GBA School Awards that you alluded to earlier. And this was started. We used to do school awards pre-pandemic, and this is something that we're launching again. And the whole point of it really is to allow schools to showcase what they're doing well, because there is a lot of innovation when it comes to schools in the GBA. So we have a whole bunch of different categories, including wellness and education, professional learning, ed tech, STEAM and STEM, and schools can apply totally for free to enter into these awards. And then we'll have a big celebration to announce who the winners are at our conference in February in Hong Kong, at the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center. So we definitely encourage schools to apply. This is the first year we're doing it, and we really want a lot of schools to participate. And we think it'll become a very prestigious award to win, and a kind of annual celebration of excellence in education in the Greater Bay Area. And as Howard said, I think there is competition, obviously, between the schools in the GBA, but I think it's a healthy competition, and there's also a lot that we can all learn from one another as well, both in terms of sharing good ideas and good practices, but also just showcasing the great stuff that's happening in each of the schools, because there certainly is a lot going on.
And then I think we have a lot of parents watching as well. So if you would like to suggest to your children, to the school that your children go to, that they would like to get involved in the GBA Awards, then just to contact myself or Justin.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Do encourage us, and we will have a public choice award as well that we're collaborating with you on, Ruth, as well, and that will be in January. So you'll have a chance to vote on which of the schools you think is best in each of the different categories. So look out for that in January. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. We usually go for about 40 to 45 minutes. A couple of questions. Thank you for your comments. Michael, Eva, I'll just type a quick response to you after the live because it's not quite related. Thanks for your comment, Jacqueline. Thank you to Justin for joining from Bangkok, especially to Howard to join from Florida in the States. Thank you very much, both of you. And it was a really interesting discussion. I mean, international trends in international schools in Asia. I mean, we could have gone on for forever, but it's a Thursday evening. I think people are sort of settling down for their tea and all of that. So thank you very much, both. Thank you to those of you who were watching, or if you've been watching on the record, thank you also. We'll leave it there. Good night, everyone. Okay.
Good night, everyone. Thanks, Ruth. Appreciate that.
All right. Thanks. Cheers.